Is it on?
There we go. Okay, it is, we will figure it out. We will work it out. So before we give you the background, I just want to give you a quick reminder of the purpose of our compensation study. The first part is to ensure market alignment. We've used comparative organizations across the country for our market analysis, including the local Wichita market. I know that was one area that we wanted to make sure that we hit when we were looking at our positions, and with the team at WSU, we were sure to do that. The second is to create internal structure alignment. We have a very large organization, and creating alignment is no small task. Part of this project is to align similar jobs across the organization. Third, to simplify classification structures. When we started this project, we had over 1,500 job descriptions. And during this time, we were able to consolidate that down to 800 unique job descriptions. And finally, with the assistance of WSU, all job descriptions were reviewed for proper minimum qualification and education levels. All right, a little bit of the background and why we are here today. In 2018, Sedgwick County contracted with Gallagher Consulting Services to perform a market analysis. And at that time, over 500 job classifications were reviewed, showing as a whole that Sedgwick County is roughly 14.3% behind market. This information, you might recall, was presented to the Commission in 2019. Thereafter, we concluded that we needed more assistance to formulate a plan to address the market information that we received. In mid-2019, we contracted with WSU to help us create that plan. In phase one, it included a thorough review of all job descriptions. Again, going back to looking at initially 1,500 and consolidating those down to about 800. Phase two included a full market comparison in which Katie will go to in further details about in her portion of the presentation coming up. We began phase three about a year ago, and then COVID happened. And at that time, we put the compensation project on pause because we had immediate issues to deal with within the organization. But now we are working the compensation project, again, full force. We're very, very close to completing this last step. We are currently applying every job description to our internal position matrix. When this step is complete, we will put all the information together for a review. In addition, we plan to have many meetings with the Commission as well as a workshop coming up in late March or early April to have very specific discussions on priorities and pay philosophies moving forward. And again, just a real quick look at the timeline and a status update moving forward. Again, we've completed phase one, phase two, and phase three. We are in the process of completing. Oh, okay. We do plan to have those job descriptions reviewed and completed by the end of next week for that internal position matrix. Thank you. We will review all those matrices results on March 5th with WSU, and then again in late March, early April, do expect a workshop that is specific to compensation. And so with that, I'm going to turn this over to Katie, and Katie's going to walk you through the processes that we've gone through so far and some of the methodologies that we've used to get the information for our compensation analysis. So Katie, I'm going to turn this over to you.
Good morning. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Okay, very good. All right, well, thank you so much for having me here today. So like Sheena said, just want to kind of describe the framework of what the work that WSU did. So as you can see, Sheena, if we can go to that next screen. Very good, thank you. So the framework consisted of a market analysis, looking at benchmarking position descriptions and collecting wage data. We also look for future growth of those positions. We looked at internal data from Sedgwick County, including positions that were hard to fill, indicating if the position description was one of those, as well as the turnover rate for that position description. And then, of course, like Sheena was talking about, that internal position matrix. So getting into more detail about that, PPMC comprised a team of 15 human resource professionals, all who have local ties, work here professionally, with backgrounds as far as municipal, county, state, nonprofit, for-profit backgrounds, and most of them had experience in both. So we had a really strong team of professionals who had experienced compensation, have been part of studies, completed studies themselves. So I'm very confident in the team that we put together. So that first piece, the market analysis, the positions were benchmarked using a system called ONET, which is powered through the Bureau of Labor Statistics. Wage data was collected at a national and state level. Through the system, we were able to look at projected growth. This is public information that's available to anyone. It's collected through the BLS, through state workforce agencies here in Kansas. That would be the Kansas Department of Labor. And they collect that information through unemployment insurance information that comes up through employers, as well as surveys that they put out to employers. There is about 800 occupations that they profile through the system and compare to. So with that, we were able to benchmark all positions, and we really looked at the skill sets that are in there. ONET's a powerful system. It has a lot of details where you're able to mainstream the different bullet points that you might say are on a position description. We were able to compare to those things. But that wasn't enough information to do this. So we also used a system that's called comp analysis. We were able to compare market data from 3 comparative communities, including and then the Wichita area, as Sheena said. These communities were approved by Sedgwick County leadership, and they were Polsky County, or Little Rock, Guilford County, or Greensboro, North Carolina is that area, Des Moines, Iowa, and that's Polk County, and then, of course, Wichita. We were also used the information that was collected in the Gallagher study as well. So I believe there were 100 jobs that were profiled by Gallagher, and that information was also included in that if the job was profiled. So comp analysis, some information for you on that. That is a paid data source. It's comprised of salary surveys. There's about 350 to 400 salary surveys that they do. It's 100% paid for, and that's really important. There are some salary surveys that are out there that have information that is self-reported and then therefore not as accurate of information. When you're paying for the salary survey to come back from a source, an entity, there's a lot level of more accuracy, and that's what we were looking for on this. The system is very powerful. Like I said, they have over 1,500 or 15,000, unique job titles, and it spans all industries. They also have the capabilities within the system to pare down by sectors and put a scope over the work that we were looking at. So we were able to apply that government scope to what we were doing. But also one of the most unique things, in the county, there's so many different job descriptions as Sheena described, and some of those positions definitely are what I call hybrid jobs. So they might have, we all wear multiple hats, right, into different work that we do. So we were able to create position descriptions that they call it hybrid in their work, but really like a good example would be a case manager in one of the departments and a caseload, but at the same time they have supervisory responsibilities. And so we were able to mash those different position descriptions together to get accurate wage data on what we should be looking at for that. So as you can imagine, there are thousands of data points that were collected. The information we looked at was at the 10th, the 50th, and 90th percentile as far as wages go. And we looked at that information, collected all that stuff. Like Sheena said, we looked at minimum qualifications, education levels, and put all that information together. And it was, the data was cleaned. We adjusted it for cost of living. And then the data was averaged. Industry standards that I think are important to note is when we think about market rate, we want to think about 50th percentile. So I said we were at the 10th, the 50th and the 90th percentiles collecting data. That 50% is what is considered market rate. So anything below market rate, 20% or more below market rate, is considered significantly behind market rate. So we were able to take that information and provide it back to in our data collection and make some recommendations from there on possible grades as well as educational requirements based on what we found in the study. So again, the internal information that we talked about, so keep in mind what I said about in the slide that we're viewing right now regarding market data, but also some things to look at as well is the internal information that was collected from Sedgwick County. So when we look at high turnover, 10% is, in an industry standard, is considered probably pretty average on a turnover rate. Anything below that, you're keeping your employees. Anything above that, you might need to assess what's going on. And then we looked at difficult to fill positions as well. So that's about 6 months being open and vacant, not being able to get someone into that particular position. So looking at that, what's in front of us right now on the screen, this is the information that we were able to collect overall. So these are big numbers. They're not down in the weeds whatsoever. But 25% of jobs were in that need to look at area, so that 20% or greater behind market value. The next, you see it's kind of in the yellow, that's kind of like a stoplight chart. In the yellow, that 15 to 20% range, we have 11% of position descriptions were in this range. And why I want to point that out is we need to be watching these. These are ones that could fall into that 20% easily, so something to be looking at. And then you have a lighter yellow and a green area here. So you have 52% of the position descriptions that we assessed were between 9% and 14%. So, or as you can see, positions between 14% and 9% above the 50% value. And then in the green, you have 10% or above the 50th percent. So those are ones that we may need to look at. What's the reason why they are I don't want to say out of whack, but why is this pay different? And there might be different things to assess with that as well. So just to kind of set up the framework a little bit more, and Misty's going to talk about this next in the next slide, but the internal position matrix. So that is something, sometimes people refer to it as a job leveling. I was looking at SHRM, and one of the ways that they describe this is a systematic method of objectively and accurately assigning value to individual positions within an organization. It's a process that defines and evaluates knowledge, skills, abilities to perform jobs. And so I'm going to turn it over to Misty now so she can talk a little bit more about what's going on right now.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Misty Bruckner from the Public Policy and Management Center at Wichita State. Gina, can you go back to the one right before? Thank you. So as Sheena mentioned and as Katie mentioned, right now we are going through all 800 job descriptions, and we'll complete that by next week, to look at what I would consider the impact that job has on the organization as well as in the community. So thinking of this as all jobs don't have the same impact in your organization, this is a systematic way to go through that and evaluate the impact that job has. So we are looking at things such as the autonomy of that position, how they can act on their own, how their decisions are made. We're looking at customer service levels, so how much interaction do they have with customers? What's the impact of their decisions on customers within Sedgwick County? We're looking at the technical skill that's required to do that job. So that could be things such as license requirements. It could be certifications that they may need. It could be just the complexity of the decision making that's involved with that position. We're looking about the impact of the decision. So some jobs have impact on a very few people. Some positions in your organization have impact on almost everyone in Sedgwick County. So that's a big part of that. As we move into levels of supervisory, we start looking about budget authority. We start looking at the scope of their supervision. Do they supervise just a few people? Do they supervise hundreds of people? And then the last one, as we move into department heads and higher, we're really looking at planning for the organization, but also for the community. So This is all done in a scale, and so each one of these criteria, think of it as a rubrics type of effort, right? We are scoring all of these on each criteria. So we are going to complete all 800 by next week. We have 2 people internally at Sedgwick County participating in this, and then I'm from the outside looking at these job descriptions, and then we'll be going through a scoring process. And I will not go into the details of the methodology, but there's a method and process that we go through all of that to put that together. So the idea of this is just one more component in your framework to think about when you're prioritizing funding for these positions to work that through.
Okay, so next steps. Once what Misty talked about is complete, we're going to be reviewing all 5 components, the market analysis, future growth, hard to fill, turnover rate, and then the internal position matrix. This is still developing in the final stages of the report as the data is being collected. We're going to work with the leadership team to determine the appropriate way to move forward. The next item on there, you can see priorities and pay philosophy for 2022 and beyond. That will be the next step that also needs to be happening, and we'll look at that a little bit more in a few moments. There'll be a financial analysis, and then finally determining the impact of the information and what options are available. So if we can go to the next slide, I want to talk a little bit about compensation philosophy. So compensation philosophy, you look at, what's really important is looking at the overall direction of how you make compensation choices. This is based on different principles that you care about as an organization, and it could act like a blueprint of prioritizing how you spend money compensating employees. It should reflect your mission, your values, your strategic plan. This will be part of the workshop that's going to happen in late March or April regarding compensation. And it's really important that these things will provide some lasting guidance and direction for compensation priorities. So going into a little more detail and setting the stage for that and just things to think about going into that workshop, if we can go to the next slide. And thinking about aligning with the strategic plan specifically, you really want to decide if you want to meet, lead, or lag, or have some type of hybrid compensation philosophy. So as you can see on the screen, meet is very, very obvious. You're going to meet at that 50th percentile mark for the positions, that's important that for that particular position, that particular department, or for the organization. You could choose to lead. In this example, it says, we're going to hit the 75th percentile of market. So we want to pay above what that market is saying, or you're going to lag. And so some organizations, there's some here in Sedgwick County, they have an overall broad compensation philosophy. Maybe they're going to be 20% of market value. So a good example of that is if you have a pay that runs from $10 to $30 an hour, 50% would be $20 an hour, and 20% below that would be $16 an hour. And so that's just a big, broad example of what a compensation philosophy could be in the lag methodology. And so really, for the workshop, it's going to be a time to think about these things, where to apply different things that you could do to affect change with compensation, and provide direction and how to inform the process of trying to use this data to positively affect compensation and the compensation total benefits that are provided to Sedgwick County employees. And then just really a commitment too for 2020 or 2022 and beyond for what compensation philosophy looks like in the methodology of how you get there as a organization. So if we go to the next slide, I want to just give you examples of how this could all come together. So here you have 2 positions in a particular department. You can see that for both of these positions, the decision, and this is all hypothetical, but this could be that you're going to meet the market for both of these positions. The internal position matrix score, so would be like if we scored it in this particular manner, maybe one was a 3 on position number 1, position number 2 was a 2, and then you can see base that you could get where it is at the 50th percentile. And then you have the wage information that we did at WSU. So at market, where is it? Where's that 50th percentile? The next box over is where you see some color coding. So on position number 1, you see that it's in the green. It's actually 16, almost 17% above market. And there's a low projected growth. There's virtually no turnover, but when there is turnover, it is a harder to fill position. As you look down to position number 2, it is one that's significantly behind market. So it's in that red. It's over 22% behind market. It has still kind of that neutral level of growth, but there is high turnover rate, and it is a position that's hard to fill. So this is information that'll inform the decision on where to compensate these particular positions. And so we wanted to kind of give you an example of how that framework can all come together in these 2 hypothetical examples. So I'm going to turn it back over to Sheena now.
Okay, again, we wanted to give you an overview of what we've been working on. Again, a majority of the work has been completed. We are just finishing up with, again, that review of the 800 job descriptions and applying our internal position matrix score to those. And again, that's what value we give to that position as an organization. And again, you saw the factors that are going into that. So we're considering all of those when we apply a score. We're working with leadership team to determine how all of that will be weighted out and what will be appropriate. And then when we come to you to have meetings, we want to hear what your priorities, what you have heard, and what direction you would like to see things going, because we will have all of the information, again, thousands and thousands of data points that we can look at to see where we can apply our pay pool. And so part of prepping for that is we would like to know what are some of your priorities that you would like to have us present you in that workshop. So what our goal is, we would like this to really be productive for you to see information, since compensation keeps being brought up many, many times. What can we do, and what information would you like to see prior to that, so that way we can make sure you have the information to have an informative workshop?
Sheena, I have a question. I think this is going to be fantastic work, so thank you. It's long overdue, I'm sure.
Yes.
That many will think that. But so let's say, I'm going to pick on Jim's department. Let's say that he's got workers that are at an hourly or a salary that road construction, let's say. So do you compare that salary with commercial road construction, same job at like Donlinger or anything like that, or Wildcat Construction, or do you compare it, or do you compare it to other county road construction persons?
That's what we have compared to. However, as Katie mentioned, the information that we receive the salary from, we simply put a filter or an overlay for public sector. We can also look at private sector as well if we wanted to compare to a more localized market, which is not a bad idea to do.
Well, I don't know what the right answer is, but if we're losing employees to the private sector,
Yes.
to me, I think we ought to have that component. It might be a large, can you just go to NAICS or something and find that information probably easily? I don't know.
We have access to that information. All we have to do is remove that filter from that to review that information.
Okay, and when you're doing that, if I can add a layer to the complexity, so a county employee, sorry, Jim, I'm picking on the roads guys, but I can go to IT. You want to pick on Wes? Maybe let's go to finance. I want to pick on them. No, all right, just kidding. So if you add the private component in the measurement, I think it's also, it would be valuable to say salary, whatever it is, hourly or annual, whatever, plus cost of benefits, because I think the private sector probably has higher insurance rates, employee compensation, maybe not even a retirement system other than a 401k, where our public, same position might have a better insurance, health insurance, so I don't know if that component can all be worked in there, but that's just more, this is more of a question and a discussion than a.
And you might recall in the Gallagher study that they did look at our benefits package that we offered, and it showed that we were leading in that area in regards to retirement and especially health benefits. But when we did this other analysis with WSU, we did not look at the benefits package simply because we already had that information that we were leading.
Okay, well, for me, and probably for the commission, I can't speak for all of them, but if we have real data that's accurately comparable to, it's way easier for me to help support whatever the recommendation we may arrive to. But if we have gray area that we don't know, that's kind of hard to say, let's go this way and hope it's right. Okay, that's just my comments.
Yep.
So my question would be around like hazard pay. So like if we have some jobs that are very dangerous, our firefighters are running into burning buildings. How is that factored in our scale? Is it factored in at all?
We don't have a hazard pay.
Well, maybe that's not the right word. I'm saying, but if, and I'll pick on Lindsay. So Lindsay and her team, they aren't put in hazardous situations. They aren't put in dangerous situations. Would that at all be factored in?
So one of the components that we have in our internal position matrix is we talk about their conditions that they work in. So general office setting versus something like a firefighter in your example would be part of that internal position matrix that we're using. So they would be scored upon that. It's not necessarily, maybe to answer your question, it's not necessarily pulled out into the pay, but it's a part of the component that we would like to weigh.
I'd say like, you probably can't compare a 911 operator. You got probably state government for some of these jobs.
Yeah.
Even
Yeah.
probably.
Yeah.
It's the other ones.
Yeah, no, government and government for whoever's online. The other question is around, I think you touched on it just a second ago, but the benefits that aren't compensation related. So how are we, and maybe this isn't part of this per se, but I wonder as someone who is relatively young and not really thinking about retirement, but I should be, and the benefits that government does, I mean, we have great benefits. We have great retirement plans. I wonder how maybe just advertising that, or, I mean, how are we, and maybe that's not part of the compensation per se that we're gonna add in, but I wonder if we could talk about that a little bit more in our hiring practices, and we probably are, but.
Sure, we can always do better in letting people know what we offer. We do put that out there. But it is part of what we consider our overall compensation package. And so, yeah, we could include that in part of our discussions moving forward in the workshops.
I look forward to looking at what the overall analysis is when it's all done. What my worry is, there is a perception, I think, from the community that government workers have some preferential jobs based on what other workers are, because we've got a ton of people across Sedgwick County that are laid off right now, but we don't have a lot of folks in government that are being laid off. The worry, the examples that you gave where it looked like maybe somebody might get a $20,000 a year pay raise, I think that the perception of the public, if we had a bunch of people getting a large pay raise by that, based on our analysis, would have a negative, we'd get a lot of feedback as commissioners, I'll guarantee you, if that came out. So we're going to have to be real careful. I understand that we're below market in a lot of areas, but we also have to make sure that we are very respectful to the public opinion on what large pay raises might result in. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you for the presentation. I have a hope that when we get into this April workshop that we can talk about more than just wages. I understand that I think the focus of this entire study has been wages. But there's a lot more to a career than just wages. And again, I'm not saying the wages is not important, because it certainly is. But if there was a way to monetize the benefits and really compare our offering to those employees versus what may be offered elsewhere, that to me is a critical component of retaining and recruiting employees. And they just throw out there's some ideas. For example, some employers provide gymnasium memberships. Some of them provide personal time off policies versus vacation and sick leave, which I think is desirable by many people. I think our Capers 3, personally, I think Capers 3 is a wet blanket on recruiting and retaining employees. And I've said this before, I think we need to work as a group to recognize that truth and give our new employees a better option. And anyway, if you start comparing some of these other things, I think it presents a more comprehensive look at what's causing employees to want to work or not work at Sedgwick County. I think along with the expectation, one thing you've not talked about today, maybe you will, or maybe this is something that's going to be automatically provided in April, but I would like to know who we're being compared with. You know, is it just cities? Is it other counties? Is it counties in Kansas? Is it private market? Let's say private companies versus municipalities. I think it's important to know who we're comparing ourselves to. To me, one of the biggest indicators of whether we're paying some position correctly, the biggest indicator for me is the ability, I should say, would be the attrition rate. The attrition rate, I think, is a indicator that we're not paying people in that position what that position requires, and I think that's the biggest factor to me. And along with that, I think it would be, for example, if there's a consistent overtime requirement. I know, for example, people in the jail, detention deputies, some of them have to take sick leave to get time off. If they're not on sick leave, then they're working mandatory overtime. So that type of thing may be something that would be hard for them to be real happy with that position. So if that's happening, I think that's a factor that we need to understand. I had a county employee talk to me just last week, and he said, "You can pay me badly or you can treat me badly, but you can't do both." So we can overcome some of this with pay, but there are other things we ought to be focused on besides just pay. And to that end, I would like to see us explore maybe a different way of doing exit interviews to gather data, because I think the exit interviews maybe should be something we would contract out. So it's outside of our organization. They would report back to the management team and to the BOCC what they gleaned from those employees that leave and why are they leaving. Because right now, I don't think we have a good understanding as to why they're leaving. And if the exit interview is being done by the agency or by, no offense to HR, but not be done by HR, then I think there's possibilities we're not getting all of the data. And I don't know how else to say that, but I want to make sure we get the best, most accurate, and honest data we possibly can. And I think that I would rather see this put out to a contract and have our employees do it that way. And then I think I guess I have one other question. I'd like to also, in the April workshop, let us know if we can find any municipality that is actually at or greater than market. Because I think that all basically struggle with the same thing. So I'm not sure what the market actually is, but it's who is actually at market that we're trying to be like. So I'd like to know that too. That's all I got. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for all the work that you put into this. I think my perspective coming into this job, since I'm so new, might be a little different than others, but I can tell you, as a single income family with kids, pay is a huge factor in where I'm going to work and if I'm going to be able to stay or not. And coming into this job, I was able to meet with department heads, for the whole county. And the one thing I consistently heard was, our turnover rate's higher because our pay, and that was across every department. And so I think this is going to be huge to be able to retain our talent instead of spending the money on, losing someone and bringing someone else in and training and all of that. So, but my question that I would like to see in April is, I know we're going to be comparing to other places, but I would really like to see a direct comparison between the city of Wichita and even the county, Johnson County. When I was touring with different people, one thing I heard, not from everybody, but pretty repeatedly, was we used to be we were pretty close to the city of Wichita, but then over the years they, went higher and we stayed the same. So if I could see what we are compared to them in many of these cases, I think that would be helpful. Thank you.
And thank you for that feedback. We are really looking forward to having specific dialogue on the compensation. So we will include all of your feedback as we prepare for that. And again, be prepared for a lot of information at that point, because again, we will conclude all of our reviews and have all those data points. And again, we will try to color code things for you just so they are very easy to look at and review. And again, we want to hear your priorities as we work with Lindsay and her team to create the 2022 budget. Misty, yes?
Is your study going to look at things like other ways that we can provide the ability to advance? I'm sorry. Are we going to look at other ways for people to be advance in their careers? For example, if we take a new EMT that comes in, it takes 2 years to become a paramedic, but if they want to advance in their career and get to a point where that they're making more money, maybe we need to have schools set up, pay for that, give them the opportunity to advance so that they can move up to the next level. Again, my background is military, and that's what we did. We sent people to school and trained them so that they were ready for the next leadership position. And I think that that's an important thing, that we've got to look at the person as they come into the organization and where do they want to be in the future and what do we have to do to be able to get them to that place that they want to be in the future. So if we've got to pay for that, that's probably to our advantage, because we need them in those more leadership positions. Thank you.
I fully agree, and I will say that part of the things we are looking at is to encourage some tiered levels. So in your example, if someone comes in as an EMT and progresses up to a paramedic, possibly moving into a paramedic 2 or 3 based on continued certifications and experience levels as well. So yeah, that is many discussions that departments are having with us. Misty, did you have any other comments you would like to make? Okay.
Sorry,
Oh,
I have
I'm
one more
sorry.
question that I forgot to ask. When we spoke when I was coming into this position, I think you mentioned, and correct me if I'm wrong, and I'm just wondering if this will be a part of the April workshop, changing the requirements for jobs at the county. Is that something that we'll be discussing as well?
So one of the things that WSU did in part of the study, and again, all that information will be available, is they have given some suggestions for the minimum requirements for positions, looking exactly what those job duties are and maybe making some adjustments. That could change our talent pool that we are looking at, sometimes based on those.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Okay. And again, we'll just close up with questions, but again, I just want to remind you, we will have workshops and a lot of data points, and again, we'll be working with finance to help you understand how any of those changes will impact the 2022 budget. All right, thank you.